Welcome back to another track test video here at Toronto Motorsports Park. This one's a little unconventional, as you can see. It's a Mazda CX-3 CUV. No, we haven't completely lost our minds here, everyone, but we thought it would be fun to try out a CUV and really see how much does it differ from, say, a hatchback or, you know, a more conventional lower to the ground type of hatchback vehicle. So Mazda, being the good sports they are, loaned us this CX-3. This is the GT all-wheel drive model. And when you look at the specs, it's really not that far off from, say, a Mazda from a Mazda 3 Sport like we just tested. So we'll tell you a little bit more about that other car in a moment, but this is a 2019, as I said, GT all-wheel drive version. The engine is their standard 2-liter Skyactiv, makes 148 horsepower. There's been some small revisions to the engine to improve fuel efficiency, and it actually picked up 2 horsepower in 2019, so it's up from 146 to 148. And I mean, other than that, it is a small footprint, what you would call a subcompact SUV or CUV. And it looks sporty. I really like the way it looks. And driving it on the street, it's actually a hoot to drive. I really enjoy driving it on the street. It's got that typical Mazda steering feel. It's got like fast, responsive steering. The suspension is tuned in what I would describe as a very Mazda way. It's got a sporty feel. It lets you. It does let the car roll around a little bit, but not in a bad way. It just gives you that sensation of action happening. But it's all very well controlled, very well damped. I have no idea how the brakes will stand up here. I have no idea how well these all-season Yokohama tires will stand up here, but I mean, this isn't a track car. We don't expect it to be blazingly fast around here. We just want to see how well it stands up in a performance environment like this versus a hatchback. Is it as much fun? Is it as dynamic? Does it have some of that Mazda DNA in there, that sports car DNA? Or is it really more of a grocery getter? So let's take it for a few laps, see how it does, and then come back and think a little bit more about how it fits into the grand scheme of fun to drive vehicles. And here we go in the Mazda CX-3 GT all-wheel drive. It's a surprisingly compact car. I mean, it is a subcompact CUV, isn't it? So it's really quite small, but I love the styling of it. I think lower this thing 6 inches and you've really got a very convincing looking hot hatch, don't you? So I really like the styling. I find Mazda's co-design language just to be very appealing, really aggressive, great looking cars, I think. And in this soul red color, I think it's awfully easy on the eyes, as is this Napa package that they have in the interior here with these beautiful white leather seats and this gray suede-like fabric on the dash. It's a very pleasant place to be, at least in the front. If I was in the back, I might not be as happy because it is tight back there. In fact, this car is quite a bit smaller than the new Mazda 3. It has a shorter wheelbase and it's quite a bit lighter. It's like 250 pounds lighter. So it is compact, to say the least. And it's not going to be a rocket ship in a straight line. It makes 148 horsepower, as I already mentioned. I think it also makes 148 foot-pounds of torque. That might be 146. You can check the numbers if you'd like. But we're really not here about numbers, although we are going to set a lap time, which is a number. We're really just wanting to find out how much fun this is to drive in a high-performance environment. And yes, you could go and rip some canyons and kind of, you know, get the same experience, but thankfully we're very good friends with everyone here at Toronto Motorsports Park, and we thought, why not take advantage of a racetrack and see what this thing can do when we really push it to the limit. So I can tell you, even just on the warm-up lap here, it's got very good body control. It has that initial bit of body roll that all Mazdas tend to have, but then it takes a set and really feels very stable. The brakes feel like you would expect. I mean, it's obviously not on a race pad. These brakes are not built for the racetrack, so the pedal is very responsive, and it does have a nice bit of a progressiveness to it. It'll add stopping power as you add travel to the pedal, so it does what you want in a performance environment. And these all-season tires, I mean, they're going to get a little grumpy after a lap or two, aren't they? So we're not going to expect a huge amount of mechanical grip out of the car, but let's just have a little fun here and see how she behaves, and get an idea of how it compares to the Mazda 3 GT Sport all-wheel drive that I just finished testing, and that car was also all-wheel drive, also equipped with this Skyactiv 6-speed automatic transmission, which comes with a manual mode where you can either choose to shift with these flappy paddles here, or you can let it shift for you, which I'm going to do because I'm told it's got very good shift logic. It shouldn't leave me in the wrong gear when it sees that I'm driving in a spirited way. So down into turn 1 here, hard on the brakes and very good initial bite. You know, the brakes are still nice and cool, and when they're nice and cool like that, they give you a good amount of stopping power. So that's encouraging to see. This car does have the Mazda's G vectoring control system, which does some throttle cutting to try to help you trim the line, basically, to help the car turn and rotate. It will do some things with the throttle to help that happen. I don't believe it has the GSC Plus, though. I don't think it does the rear outside brake application trick that the new Mazda 3 does. So we'll see if I notice any difference in that regard. So far, I think it's actually behaving remarkably well. Like, the quality of roll control there is really very good. It's not a roly-poly SUV in the traditional sense, you know. Yes, it's got a higher center of gravity than the Mazda 3, but it feels just as well controlled. I don't feel like I'm falling over onto the side. I don't feel like I'm tearing the front outside tire off the car. It feels really quite happy to be ripped on like this. So far I'm pleasantly surprised. I thought it might feel more like a fish out of water than it does so far. It's actually perfectly content out here, letting me give it the beans as hard as I can. I do feel that G vectoring happening under my right foot, though, in the corners. It definitely is trimming the throttle a bit on me, but not in a hugely invasive way. Like, I'm aware of it, I can feel it when it's happening, but it's not completely shutting down the fun the way a lot of systems do. This is a very sophisticated system, and it's really monitoring all four contact patches in a very active, even proactive way. It's sort of predicting what is coming and trying to respond to that before it's happening, you know, so that it helps the car turn. So rather than like trying to dial out understeer after it's happened, it's looking at what I'm doing and saying, okay, this guy is really giving it the beans. Let's try to help the car rotate with some of this G vectoring in a proactive way so that I can get through the corners without getting into that really terminal understeer that you can get into in a front biased car like this one. So yes, it is all-wheel drive, and it can send, I believe, up to almost 50% of its power to the rear, but it is still a front-wheel drive based car, and it does still drive like a front-wheel drive car does, in my opinion. But I can feel it sending some power to the rear, particularly in these tighter corners. I can feel it's like, okay, we're overwhelming the fronts here, we're understeering a bit, let's send some power to the back and get this thing moving in the right direction. So all in all, I'm really pleasantly surprised by its performance out here. It doesn't feel that different than the Mazda 3 to me, which is so much lower to the ground and is a 7th generation vehicle, while this is really a 6th generation vehicle. So, well, the lap timer never lies, everyone, and I did a 1:35.0, which isn't bad. It's only a second, 1.8 seconds slower than the 2019 Mazda 3 Sport GT all-wheel drive, which is closer than I thought it would be. And to this car's credit, the CX-3 is a whole lot of fun to drive around a racetrack, which you just wouldn't expect out of this class of vehicle. It's really not designed for that, but to Mazda's credit, they really tuned the suspension extremely well. It was not rolling as excessively as you might think. I mean, when you look at a car like this where it's lifted and you see lots of wheel well gap, you think it's going to want to try to follow over on its side, but quite the contrary. This car rolls a little initially, and then it just takes a set and it stays there. It doesn't keep rolling. So they've done a really good job tuning the suspension on this, and it didn't object to being abused on the track at all, except for one instance where on my very last hot lap, as you will have seen from the in-car, in the last corner when I hit the outside curb, that upset the computer enough that it basically shut the throttle off completely, and so that lap was basically scrapped at that point. And I think, frankly, I might have gone a little faster than a 35.0 on that last lap, but that is what it is. I mean, when the computer's interviewing and shut it down, it's telling you that this isn't a car that's necessarily designed for the racetrack, and that's no surprise to anybody. I don't think there's any way to completely defeat the whole stability, traction control, and G vectoring system in this car, nor would you necessarily want to, because those systems do a good job of helping to dial out understeer. And this car doesn't have a lot of understeer. I mean, you won't hear a lot of tire squeal from the front end of this car when I'm turning those hot laps, and that's because it's really not understeering that much. It's really very engaging to drive. So if you're needing an SUV style vehicle but you still want it to be fun to drive, I think this is really a very viable option. You're not going to take this to the racetrack, but it's nice knowing that you could take it on a spirited drive up to the cottage or down a canyon road and have a lot of fun in it. It really was fun to drive. So when I look at it compared to the lower to the ground, sportier looking, more purposeful looking Mazda 3 Sport, you would think there's going to be a bigger performance gap than there really was. And to me, there wasn't as big a difference as I was expecting there to be. And I mean, frankly, if you lowered this car 6 inches, it would look like a hot hatch, wouldn't it? It's just a lifted hot hatch. So this whole CUV thing, I don't really know what that's all about. Maybe that's more marketing than it is anything else. All I know is Mazda's done a darn good job engineering this little CX-3. I'm really impressed by it. Throw another 50 horsepower under the hood and it would be more fun for an enthusiast like me, and more fun down a canyon road too, if that's your thing. So, it's not going to snap your head back with straight line performance, but as far as driving dynamics go and cornering and braking, the brakes on this were fantastic for 3 hot laps. I think it's way more engaging to drive than I was expecting it to be. So I got to give this thing a wholehearted 2 thumbs up for its driving dynamics. I really did enjoy it a lot. So I think I'm a little surprised to be saying that, but I'm going to call this one a wrap. That's it. That's all. Thank you for watching another of our track battles. I think in the next one we'll get back to more conventional things like sports cars and performance cars. So stay tuned for that in the next one. I'm feeling very nauseous here, Pete, so I'm just putting the windows down so that I don't puke on the dash in here. Ugh. Woo. Just gonna cool it off here for a minute. I'll put the windows back up before I start to talk.